At first, the story looks like another argument over the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says the strait should open. The Revolutionary Guards fire on tankers. The United States watches the blockade. China demands safe passage. Russia talks like an ally while preparing to sell into Iran's lost market. Oil traders watch the clock, but that is only the surface. The real story is that Iran gave the world two opposite signals at the same time. One side of the regime said commercial vessels could pass. Another side treated commercial vessels like targets. That is the kind of contradiction that changes how every government reads Tehran. Governments can bluff, they can threaten, they can exaggerate. But when a state cannot make its own military wing obey its own diplomatic message, the problem is no longer messaging. The problem is control. And control is the most important asset Iran is losing. The foreign minister's statement was not random. It was a signal to the world that Iran could still behave like a state. It told China, the Gulf states, and the mediators that the diplomatic track was alive. It told Washington there was still someone in Tehran capable of speaking the language of de-escalation. And the IRGC fired. That single contradiction revealed the whole crisis. The diplomats are trying to keep the door open. The guards are trying to prove the door belongs to them. This is why the situation is more dangerous than a normal confrontation. If Iran had one clear strategy, even a hostile strategy, the world could price it. If Iran had decided to fight, Washington could plan against that. If Iran had decided to negotiate, China and the Gulf states could push the process forward. But Iran appears to be doing both. Negotiating and sabotaging, warning of collapse and pretending unity. This is not strategy. It is a power struggle expressed through ships. At the top of that struggle is a man who cannot participate in it. Mojtaba Khamenei was supposed to give the regime continuity after Ali Khamenei was killed. He was supposed to become the new center of gravity. Instead, he is unconscious, formally above the system, but physically unable to command it. That creates a strange and dangerous reality. His authority exists, but his judgment does not. His name can be invoked, but his decision cannot be heard. The negotiators can claim they are acting for the state. The IRGC can claim the negotiators lack authorization. The president can speak to the public. The hardliners can call him weak, and no final voice can settle the fight. That is how a hospital room becomes a geopolitical crisis. In a normal succession, the new leader chooses a line. He rewards one camp, disciplines another, and forces the system to adjust in Iran today. No one can do that, so every faction is trying to create facts before the others can stop it. The diplomats create facts at the table. The president creates facts by telling the public the war's costs are becoming unbearable. The IRGC creates facts at sea. State television creates facts by insisting the people support the war, and the people create their own fact by withdrawing belief from the official story. That is the deeper fracture. Ahmad Vahidi and the IRGC represent the logic of permanent confrontation. Their calculation is not hard to understand. The guards became powerful in a world of danger. Their budgets, networks, influence, and domestic authority all grow when Iran is under threat. In war, they are indispensable. In peace, they become a question. A deal would not only reduce external pressure, it would increase internal accountability. People would ask why the country was pushed this far, why oil revenue was sacrificed, why ports were exposed, why ordinary Iranians were told to endure pain while institutions protected themselves, why the foreign minister announced opening while the guards fired on ships. For the IRGC, those questions are more dangerous than American warships. American warships justify them. Domestic accountability threatens them. That is why escalation can become useful even when it damages the country. The IRGC does not need Iran to be comfortable. It needs Iran to remain dependent on the guards. On the other side is the survival faction, Ghalibaf, Iraqi, and Pezeshkian are not outside the regime. They are not trying to remake Iran into something liberal overnight. They are trying to keep the system from breaking under its own weight. Their argument is simple. If the war continues, the state may lose the economic base it needs to survive. Oil is the center of that calculation. The blockade does not merely stop exports. It turns oil into pressure trapped inside the country. Storage fills, production faces forced shutdown, wells can be damaged. Future output can be reduced. What begins as a temporary revenue problem can become long-term economic damage. That is why every day matters. The IRGC, the president has to think about reconstruction. The diplomats have to think about whether anyone will still believe a deal is enforceable. The public has to think about prices, salaries, food, fear, and the feeling that the country is being sacrificed for a war it did not choose. Pezeshkian's statement mattered because he said the quiet part aloud. The people must be told the truth. In a stable system, that is a normal sentence. In a brittle system, it sounds like an accusation. It implies the official story is failing. It implies propaganda no longer matches reality. That is why the hardliners reacted so fiercely. They understand that once truth enters the room, slogans lose power. State television can claim the public supports the war. It can say the nation is united. It can invent numbers and call them proof. But the real mood is harder. Many Iranians see the conflict as belonging to the regime, not to the people. Many blame the authorities for the country's condition. Many want relief before revenge. This is why the survival faction is dangerous to the war faction. Not because it is morally pure, because it is beginning to speak closer to the public's exhaustion. That gives it a kind of legitimacy. The IRGC cannot easily copy. The guards can command weapons. They can command fear. They can command television. But they cannot easily command tired people to feel enthusiastic forever. And now even Iran's external environment is changing. China is the most important shift for years. Beijing was Iran's economic oxygen. It bought oil, supported alternative channels, and treated Iran as useful in a larger contest with Washington. But China never wanted endless disorder, Hormuz. China wants predictable flow, oil flow, shipping flow, trade flow. So when China signals that Hormuz must remain open, especially through communication with Saudi Arabia, it is telling Tehran something painful. Iran matters to China, but Hormuz matters more. That is a direct blow to the IRGC's strategy. The more the guards weaponize the strait, the more they threaten the interests of Iran's most important buyer. A lifeline does not remain a lifeline if you keep setting fire to the road it uses. Russia is colder still. Moscow can condemn the blockade and praise Iran's rights while preparing to replace Iranian energy in the markets. Iran can no longer serve. Every trapped Iranian barrel is potential room for a Russian barrel. That is not betrayal in Russia's mind. It is arithmetic. So Iran is discovering something hard. Its enemies want it weakened. Its partners want it useful. Its customers want stability. Its public wants relief. Almost no major actor wants the IRGC's ideal outcome except the IRGC. That is why the next phase is so unstable. A deal is still possible, but only if the negotiating side can prove it controls enough of the state. If Araki signs and Vahidi fires, the deal is worthless. If Pezeshkian promises de-escalation and the guards control the water, the promise is hollow. If Galibaf claims authority, but the supreme leader cannot approve anything. Every concession can be challenged later. No one wants to negotiate with half a government. That is the central risk. The question is no longer only whether Iran wants a deal. The question is whether any Iranian faction can make a deal stick. If the negotiators win, the path is narrow but real. Hormuz can reopen, the oil clock can slow, China can stay engaged, Gulf states can lower the temperature, Washington can claim pressure worked, Tehran can say it survived. If the IRGC wins, the opposite path opens. Tankers remain vulnerable, the blockade hardens, talks collapse into theater. Oil wells move closer to shutdown, China pulls further away. Russia benefits, the public grows angrier, the regime becomes more dependent on the very institution driving it toward isolation. And if neither side wins quickly, the most dangerous outcome arrives. Drift is where individual incidents begin deciding national strategy. A tanker is fired on, a convoy reacts, a commander misreads a signal, a blockade line tightens, a negotiation is delayed, state television escalates, a faction refuses to back down because backing down would weaken it internally. That is how states stumble into disasters they did not formally choose, not through strength. Through incoherence. This is the problem with Iran today. The outside world is looking for one Iranian decision, but Iran has become a contest over who gets to define the decision. The president wants the truth told before the country breaks. The foreign minister wants enough opening to keep diplomacy alive. The IRGC wants enough conflict to remain indispensable. The public wants the crisis to stop consuming daily life. China wants the waterway open. Russia wants the market gap. America wants leverage. Gulf states want safety. Everyone has a position. No one clearly has control. That is more dangerous than a clean confrontation. In a clean confrontation, each side can measure the other. In a fractured confrontation, every signal becomes unreliable. A statement may not bind a commander. A commander may not represent the state. A deal may not restrain a faction. A threat may be issued for internal reasons and then become external reality, because the person who made it cannot afford to retreat. That is why the same day contradiction matters so much. Open Hormuz, fire on tankers, those are not two policies. They are two Irans colliding in public. And the collision is happening at the world's most sensitive energy choke point. That is what stunned Washington. Not that Iran threatened, not that the IRGC acted aggressively. Washington has seen Iranian threats before. It has seen hardliners before. What is different now is the visible gap between the regime's diplomatic mouth and its military hand. The mouth says open. The hand pulls the trigger. The center says nothing because the center cannot speak. That is not confidence. That is a fracture reaching the surface. Once a fracture reaches the surface, every shock widens it. The next ship matters. The next statement matters. The next meeting matters. The next Chinese signal matters. The next IRGC move matters. But underneath all of them is one question. Can Tehran still speak with one voice before the crisis speaks for it? Right now, the answer is unclear. And in the Strait of Hormuz, unclear is dangerous, because oil markets do not wait for succession battles to finish. Tanker captains do not wait for factional politics to settle. Foreign navies do not wait for Tehran to decide which order is real. Every hour of contradiction becomes another hour where someone outside Iran has to guess what Iran means. That is how miscalculation grows. The most dangerous thing in Iran today is not that its leaders chose one extreme path. It is that they may no longer be capable of choosing one path at all. A regime can survive pressure. It can survive sanctions. It can survive military losses, but it cannot safely manage a blockade. A leadership vacuum, a public legitimacy crisis, an oil shutdown clock, foreign pressure from China and Russia, and armed factional rivalry, while sending two opposite instructions to the world. That is the real story behind Hormuz. Not open or close, not peace or war, but whether Iran is still a state with one command or a regime whose parts are now moving against each other faster than anyone outside can control.